Bonjour, bonjour à tous. I'm going to speak in English, but I need to say bonjour because I can. It's great to be here. Thank you very much to Techfugees for having us. We understand that this is the last session, so we're probably...
Nobody is going to speak in French. Now we don't have Aurélien.
We don't know if Deborah is going to speak in French.
Je vais dire quelques mots en français.
Okay.
Mais oui, c'est ça, quand même,
pour
on peut...
prouver qu'on est là.
Just in
Thank
case.
you.
Merci beaucoup.
Yes, okay.
So we realized that we were probably standing between you and a drink, and we're going to talk about politics. We're going to also talk about technology, rest assured, but we are going to talk a little bit about politics. So we are extremely fortunate to have two wonderful thinkers and people who have been and who continue to be at the forefront of government and thinking on these issues. Really, this is a great honor for me. So I am Mathieu Lefebvre. I am the co-founder of an organization called More in Common that we started about a year ago. The goal of More in Common is to map out public opinion and mobilize people in the service of closer communities. And I think the reason why I am here is that we did a lot of polling around the question of public opinion of refugees. Why are people not nicer to refugees was the initial impetus for our research, and it took us to very interesting places because through the prism of refugees, one can understand the state of society. And so we mapped out France and Germany, and we are currently looking at Greece. So that's why I'm
And
here.
this is the report.
And this is, thank you
Which
so
I've
much,
read.
John. Which you've
And
read.
which is very good.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. So Aurélien Taché is not here. Aurélien is an MP who was tasked by President Macron with a new report, which is extremely important, on rethinking France's integration policy. For those of you who know France, you know how tall a task that is. And unfortunately, he cannot be here because he has to vote an amendment in Parliament, and he has to be here, and that's the way Parliament works. And neither Prime Minister Papandreou nor John Ralston Saul will be surprised by that. That's just the way it works. However, we will be joined by Deborah Asseraf, who is his right hand in this report, and she knows a lot about this. So we will be joined by them. But without further ado, we were given a very short amount of time. Perhaps there is a hidden criticism of people who work in politics that they tend to talk too long. We got the message, so we will prove you wrong. And hopefully, we will show.
Hopefully,
I mean, we'll try, and we will adopt the style of a pitch, of an elevator pitch. So we are going to try to convince you of great big political ideas, and so we're going to kick it off. And I asked our speakers to think about one big political idea in Greece and beyond, in France when Deborah joins us, and in Canada and the world. One big political idea, Prime Minister Papandreou, that would make a big difference for refugees and for integration more broadly, let's say at the 5-year horizon. So if you will kick us off, I would be very grateful.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief, but I do want to say initially a thank you to all of you, because I've been hearing a lot of not only ideas, but so many people who have contributed to the refugee crisis and helping out, and of course helping out in Greece, but not only, a lot of people involved with Greece. So just a very warm thank you from my heart as a Greek. But a second thank you because you are involved with the refugee world, and I also was a refugee. My father was a refugee, my grandfather was a refugee, my great-grandfather was a refugee, and mother, and so it was, I feel a lot, and I was in Sweden. And I think what has come out, because I've listened to a lot, both the pitches and also the discussions here, is we need a new narrative. We need technology to support the new narrative, but we also need a new narrative. And if this community can help out in creating this new narrative for our societies, which have more this, developing this fear, the walls, the burden, the passive refugee, the isolationism, into a more of an opportunity for change, for capacity for our societies to develop, adapt, be resilient, cooperative, inclusive, co-create are some of the words that I've heard. beyond conflict, collectively listening, leapfrog towards solutions, crowdsource, co-create in this constantly turbulent world. That's not only what we need to do for the refugees, that's what we need to do for our societies in any case. But the new narrative, I believe, and talking from my personal experience, is that we should see the refugee as a change agent. Think of what a refugee is doing. A big decision to leave his or her country. Why? Because is not satisfied or can't stay there, so obviously wants to have a very different situation in his or her life. They don't like what they have been seeing and living, and they're threatened by what they've been seeing and living in their country. So in fact, if we, and particularly in Europe, want to give back to some of the countries where we've had a big responsibility for what's happened, whether it's Iraq or Libya or Syria or the Middle East and so on, let's think of the refugees as a change agent, not only for our societies, but for our societies too, but also for at a future stage when their odyssey is at the final stage, which could be, not all of them will return, to build those societies, hopefully democratic, inclusive, tolerant, diverse, and so on. I say that because that's how my experience as a refugee. When I was in Sweden, I learned, I saw things, and I became a change agent in my country. And as a refugee, I said things were bad in Greece. We had to change. We had a dictatorship. Where can technology help? I think we have seen that, as others have said, there will be more of this. Refugees is not a problem that's going away, not an issue that's going away. There'll be more and more of growing and fewer resources to deal with this. So technology can be a real empowering tool through the whole process. And there's like 5 stages. One is the decision to leave the country, reach safe haven, the aid, the integration, participating, and maybe at some point even returning or helping your country rebuild. So I would say that is actually a road to a citizenship. And my proposal for Europe is to use the refugee problem as an issue, not as a problem, but as a way to create the first real European citizen who is not a Frenchman or a French woman or Greek or German or whatever, but has a European citizenship. And to use blockchain technology of direct help and aid and so on to allow this European citizen to be mobile in Europe, but also the blockchain sort of building up the prerequisites to become a citizenship, maybe even an electronic citizenship, as Estonia now has done with e-residency, but use that concept to be able to give a citizenship, where they have rights and they have then the experience also as participating in our society, in Europe, reforming even our societies, thinking about it, which is, in fact might be a precursor to what global citizenship might look like. And by doing that, we're also giving them the rights, but also the capacity to learn from and be involved in comparing and saying, okay, what will I learn from France? What will I learn from Germany or Austria or Greece, which I can then take back to Syria, or what are the things that I don't like and I actually would like to contribute the way we do things in Syria or wherever else, where we may actually can add to our societies here. So that's my 3-minute pitch.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Maybe 4 minutes.
No, it was great. Very good start, and lots of food for thought. I am completely blind up here, and so if Deborah is here, or if anybody, she's here.
Coming, yeah.
Voilà,
Oh, poor thing.
Now this is a high-flying exercise because she found out that she was going to speak on this panel about 17 minutes ago. She was in Parliament, and now she's here. So we will see. Round of applause for her.
Thank you.
How are you?
So, as I was saying, hello. Deborah, we have one very important question for you, which is, est-ce que tu vas parler en français ou en anglais?
I don't mind speaking in English.
Okay, great. So France has come a long way because there used to be a time where you could actually not say that as a sort of representative. So, we've just heard from Prime Minister Papandreou some very interesting ideas. I have lots of questions, but I will hold back, and I'm sure you do. But seeing refugees as an opportunity, as change agents, and the creation of a European citizen, in a way, capitalizing on the opportunities of this refugee crisis. So, Deborah, we're going to go to you. We're going to talk about France, and then we will end up in the world and in Canada. So, Deborah, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you work with Aurélien Taché, an MP, a French
Indeed.
MP, part of the new
Generation.
thank you very much, of MPs in France. You all know about our situation in France, which is full of hope. And Aurélien Taché has been tasked, and you are working very closely with him on this, with a new report by President Macron. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about this report first. And then what I've asked our panelists to do, and what Prime Minister Papandreou did brilliantly, was to pitch us one big political idea to improve the situation of refugees, in your case, in our country, France.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mathieu. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Techfugees. Well, I'm going to introduce the parliamentary mission very quickly. What is happening right now is that Emmanuel Macron took a very strong stance in favor of welcoming refugees during the presidential campaign, and it was a big difference from the past, because in our political landscape, it has always been seen as dangerous to take such a stance. So, in fact, the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, missioned my MP, Aurélien Taché, who is now in charge of giving a report on our integration policies. So what his letter of mission actually says is we need to reform all our integration policies, because our integration model that was drafted 30, 40 years ago does not really work anymore. We see that the unemployment rate for migrants is very high in compared with OECD countries, and we have so much to work on, such as language learning, culture transmission, and employment. So all these dimensions of the integration policies are something we're looking at. So let me tell you something about the method. So what we're doing right now is basically auditioning as many people as we can. So with Aurélien Taché, we meet a lot of people from the civil society, local electives, officials from the government, to learn as much as we can about what is not working right now in France and to implement the best practices. So there are very good practices right now in many associations, startups, and we see through auditions that so much can be done. And let me give you an example, a very concrete one. A very practical example, for instance, when a refugee comes to France, this person has to go through the, let's say, migration agency, OFI, Office de... Bref. And when this person is interviewed first, they have to follow language courses if their level of French is too poor. So you have either 50, 100, or 200 hours of language courses that are mandatory to follow. And people who have only 50 hours of courses to take are usually the people who already talk a bit French, and these ones can reach the A1 level at the end of the 50 hours, which is talking French like someone who's actually something like 12 years old, so it's enough to discuss, to have the basic notions. But someone who takes the 200 hours of language courses is someone who doesn't speak French at all, and at the end, only 44% of these people reach the A1 level. So at the end of the day, you see that the people who need these public policies the most, who need the language courses the most, are those who struggle the most. And we don't do enough. For instance, Germany gives 600 hours of language courses to refugees, and we only give them 200, which is not enough. And we know all that stuff. So there is so much that can be done.
Great. And so this is very very interesting, and I think that this report will have, we hope, a big impact at the start of President Macron's term. There's a lot of very concrete applications to this, and in a previous meeting, we talked about the positive value and image of entrepreneurship. So refugees as entrepreneurs, which is a lot of what has been discussed here, break stereotypes of refugees as victims. Is that something that you're thinking about, just the general frame of work and entrepreneurship particularly?
Absolutely. So we met with Singa, who's doing an association that does a lot about
Wonderful
entrepreneurship.
NGO, yep.
Exactly. And we met a lot of NGOs who are working on entrepreneurship, but obviously entrepreneurship is not a model that we can generalize to everyone,
Sure.
because many refugees come with qualifications and skills, and we have to promote them, of course, but not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
So we want people to be as autonomous as possible, meaning we have to build skills and work on skills they already have. So our main goal with the mission is to implement a public policy that gives as much insight into the labor market to these people so that they can integrate on the labor market as best as they can. So right now it's not the case, but of course integration, the first dimension of integration is finding a job, we think.
Right.
So it goes through language courses, but also learning a job.
Right. Again, lots of interesting things we're going to talk about in the discussion that we have, but I want to give you have a microphone, John?
Yeah.
You've got a, sorry, it's hidden. To John Ralston-Saul. So for those of you who do not know John, John is one of Canada's and indeed the world's preeminent thinkers on many of these issues. And he, along with his wife Adrienne, who is somewhere here, they started on a totally amazing organization called the Institute for Canadian Citizenship. I was very privileged to witness your work firsthand. And so we're very privileged to have you straight in from Toronto, jet lag at its peak, over to you. And maybe you can explain what the Institute does. I think it's a very interesting model.
On a créé l'Institut pour la citoyenneté canadien il y a une douzaine d'années, et il y a des milliers d'organisations qui travaillent avec les immigrants et les réfugiés, mais à partir du moment où on devient un citoyen, c'est-à-dire 85% des immigrants au Canada, c'est à peu près 350 000 par année, devient citoyen à l'intérieur des 5 ans. Parce que notre principe est très simple, on ne veut absolument pas avoir des gens qui restent au pays sans être citoyens. Parce que si vous êtes un citoyen, vous pouvez complètement vous engager et travailler avec tout le monde. Donc ça c'est le principe, et l'Institut travaille avec les nouveaux citoyens. So the Institute works with the new citizens to get them involved right away, as fast as possible, in as many ways as possible, cultural, business, politics, whatever. And then we have all sorts of grassroots programs, and then, which we can talk about afterwards. Some of them would not be exportable. Some of them are very exportable, I think. And we're seeing the deputy tomorrow, and so we can talk more about that.
Indeed.
Yeah. And then 2 years ago, we started something called 6 Degrees Citizen Space, which is a kind of gathering to talk about all of this. And about 5,000 people from 25 countries come, and Ai Weiwei was there this year, and so on. So let me make a kind of, I guess, a suggestion, which is a sort of shift in thinking. You know, I'm not going to talk about before the Second World War in 3 minutes, but since the Second World War, approximately 75 years, most Western European countries have been massive immigrant countries. They've been total, intellectually and from the point of view of policy, largely in denial of this, and much of that immigration has been fabulous. I mean, refugees, all sorts of family things. Some of it has not been so nice, cheap labor and so on. But, you know, Western Europe is an immigration continent and has been for 75 years. In spite of that, after 75 years, not a single European country has what could be described as an immigration citizenship policy, has all sorts of great little policies, you know, which is what you're working on, those great little policies and not so great, but nobody has a proper immigration citizenship policy as one. as a result, there is in no European country a minister of citizenship and immigration. What there is a minister of the interior, which is to say a minister of order and police, under whom there is a junior minister very often who looks after immigration and citizenship, which colors completely the way in which one's going to see that. That includes Britain, Germany, everybody is the same. I think one is in the process of changing or has changed, I'm not sure. And the third point, as a result of that, no European country has the civil service which would come with a large, independent, senior, separate ministry of immigration and citizenship, not colored by the police and order. That's a separate issue of cooperates with, but it's not the same thing. And so that means, for example, you go to the countries that have these policies, you go to their embassies in Delhi or in Lebanon or in Egypt, 50% of the embassies will be specialists in immigration and citizenship. You go to the European embassies, it ain't there, because they don't exist. And a large part of the crisis has to do with the absence of these three strategic elements. These are not tactical elements, they're strategic elements. So the first thing I would say is European countries need to create independent, large ministries of immigration and citizenship so that, for example, in Canada and many other countries, when the Prime Minister forms the government and the top 5 or 6 or 7 ministries go, you know, defense, foreign affairs, finance, immigration and citizenship is one of the 5 or 6. That changes completely the strategy approach. It doesn't mean you take more. It means that the whole attitude, the whole approach becomes less frightening because it's clear. And then with that comes a strategy, and with that comes a civil service, and with that comes a public debate, which is completely different from the kind of fear-laden public debate which everyone is struggling with. And that process then allows you to clarify very fast what is an immigrant and therefore a citizen. To really link these two together, I would call for the instant banning of the word migrant, because the word migrant means you're hoping they're going to go away. That's what it means. On the way through, they've been here 3 generations, still called migrants. What does that mean?
Gastarbeiter.
Gastarbeiter. I mean, come on. So, you know, immigrants become citizens as fast as possible. And I would finish by saying 2 little things. One is, it's a small point, but public ceremonies during which people become citizens are incredibly important because they're very important to the people who become citizens because it is a public affirmation of an enormously courageous choice that they have made, and it is a public affirmation of the country in question that these people are in some way becoming part of this family. And when I speak, and when Adrian speaks at citizenship ceremonies, we always say to people, we thank you. We thank you for having chosen us and chosen to join our family. This is a whole other way of thinking. And then the final comment goes with all of that is that government structure that I've described only works if it is completely balanced by a volunteer structure. I'm not talking about charity. I'm not talking about little things. There are fabulous things in France, fabulous things in Germany, fabulous things in Greece. I'm talking about an enormous volunteer structure. You know, 40, 50% of the population who work in many areas, but a lot of them work in the area of refugees, immigrants, and citizenship. That then becomes a balance which makes the whole thing work and makes the citizens feel involved.
Thank you so much, John. I have to say that John invited me to observe one of these citizenship ceremonies in Canada, and it's one of the most moving things I've seen. It was fantastic. I'm struck by what you said to ban the word migrant. There was a poll taken in France last week, La Fondation Jean Jaurès, a very interesting poll, and for the first time in a long time, French people have now understood that the refugees who are here are not going back. It was about 27% It was polling at around 27% when you asked people in France, do you think they will go back? And people said, yeah, as in, we really hope they go back as fast as possible. Now it's 57% say, well, they're staying. They don't like it, that's for sure in France, unfortunately, but the penny has dropped, and so that's a really big shift.
Yeah,
and so that enables the kind of things that you're talking about. John, just one quick thing, because this is a tech crowd. The cultural
Access Pass.
Access Pass. And it's very tech-enabled, that pass.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us
Okay.
briefly about how that works?
So just to say, first of all, that I've sat here and listened to several of the sessions today because I got off the plane only this morning. I mean, I think it's fabulous what you're doing. I mean, there's no question that, as somebody said, there has to be a revolution inside government and inside the private sector, the big corporations, because they don't understand what technology can do. Everything I've described only works at these numbers if the technology functions, because that's what allows people, to cooperate, to be in touch. So one of the programs we set up, which I think is exportable, is this, that at the citizenship ceremonies, the judge or the clerk of the ceremony says to everybody, you can sign up today or whatever for the Cultural Access Pass, Laissez-Passer Culturel, and this means that you and your family will become members of virtually every major cultural institution, major and small cultural institution in the country. Museums, parks, everything. Free entry, and it's not like free entry to the Louvre, but if there's a special show, you have to pay. Free entry to everything, everything.
For a year.
For a year, for you and your family, your children. Special prices on the trains for you and your children to go and travel around the country, to parks, everything. And then we're now expanding it into theater, music. It actually, believe it or not, was the National Opera that said, we can do this. Ahead of all the left-wing muscular places, the opera said, we want these kids.
Right.
We want these newcomers, and we'll take them free, and we'll take them every night, and they set aside a number of seats for them.
So there's a tech platform that allows all those bookings to happen seamlessly, and that
we started out, and we get about 50,000 people a year joining, but we could be getting 250,000.
Right.
So we're just getting the funding for a new app, which will take it immediately to about 150,000. Mm-hmm. And after that, 200,000 and so on. And all sorts of other things. One of the outcomes of it is that our institute is in direct contact with, I forget, 300,000 or 400,000 new citizens.
Right.
With whom we're asking questions, they're asking questions, we're involved with them. It's not governmental, so there's no invasion of privacy. But they're very interested to have an impact, for example, on looking at what works for them, what doesn't work for them. Right. So it's a real machine for working out how people are going to live together, and it's all technology driven.
Great. I have lots more questions, but we are almost out of time, and I'm going to use my chair's privilege to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions. And if you do, I cannot see you, so you have to raise up your hand. There's a person there, some people there. If you could just introduce yourself briefly, tell us where you're from. And
Gautam from TikTok. We provide language services in Norway today, but everywhere later.
In Norway?
In Norway.
Great.
It's an open marketplace for finding people that speak the same language as you, and you can book them directly yourself. We work a lot with the Norwegian government, and one of the challenges we faced was, as a startup, governments aren't so friendly with startup contracts. They wanted last 3 years financial status, or a track record of 3 other government contracts. So partnering with the government just became a huge hassle. And we had to spend a lot of time finding individual government entities that were willing to put aside those questions and work with us. So what can we do to make it easier? What is done here in your countries?
Maybe we'll take 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll go ahead.
I am a Syrian refugee in Paris, and I was wondering about your actual point previously when you mentioned that a lot of French people don't realize that refugees are here to stay. And I was wondering about the integration process in terms of what I've witnessed, the people who are applying for the refugee status, the people who are getting accepted for the 10 years program, the 1 year temporary protection. I was wondering about the integration process in terms of what's happening to adapt those people to live in France for good. And because pretty much when you're accepted for the 10 years residence visa, I don't know if everyone knows, you're actually allowed to apply for that French citizenship directly, and it might take up to 18 months to take. So it's pretty much, you are on the way to become a French citizen, but yeah, in terms of what they're...
Okay, we'll try to answer that, thank you.
Hi,
And we're glad you're here.
Sorry, Angus Barry. I work for a resettlement charity. We work with policymakers to try and match refugees with communities where they'll thrive. My question is about policy change, and I think there are three really good ideas from the panel which I could definitely get behind. But how do you envision that policy change happening, whether it's in the machinery of government or in Europe or in France? Thank you.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Joseph. Je suis réfugié de la République démocratique du Congo. Et je suis content aujourd'hui que je puisse entendre la complexité de réfugiés ou des migrants, comme l'avait dit l'ancien Premier ministre, cette réalité un peu plus et par rapport à ce que nous sommes en train de connaître ici. Moi, j'ai 10 ans, effectivement, comme réfugié. Et j'ai été encadré par Techfugees, par initiative des sports des réfugiés. Mais là, aujourd'hui, l'intervention de notre député, effectivement, c'est pour essayer un peu de comprendre, parce que la mission de notre parlementaire, du gouvernement, c'est d'essayer un peu de comprendre comment trouver des solutions rapides aux demandeurs d'asile qui arrivent en France, parce qu'il y a cette nuance entre demander et avoir le statut de réfugié. Et maintenant, notre souci, c'est de savoir comment pallier à cette situation par rapport au temps que le demandeur d'asile passe en France pour être reconnu réfugié. Et surtout avec tous ces problèmes de langue, parce qu'un demandeur d'asile qui vient de Syrie, qui vient de quelque part, qui ne connaît pas le français, et il a énormément de problèmes.
Bien sûr, ouais.
Et il arrive qu'il peut être porteur d'une valeur, d'un talent. Il peut se dire que je peux être aussi citoyen, comme l'a souligné M. John. Quelle est la solution d'abord à cette problématique?
C'est leur job, c'est ça qu'ils cherchent.
Et deuxièmement, est-ce que le gouvernement français ne pourra pas envisager de mettre au cœur des propositions, des solutions apportées aux réfugiés, associer aussi certains réfugiés qui peuvent aussi apporter quelque chose, comme le fait Techfugees, parce que Techfugees nous a approchés. Il a encadré certains réfugiés pour connaître réellement les besoins des réfugiés. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas cette possibilité de créer cette opportunité, de donner cette opportunité à certains réfugiés qui peuvent donner des réflexions sur des solutions à apporter aux réfugiés?
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour vos questions.
Merci.
We'll take one more and then we'll just answer all of them. Is there one more? Not one more.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're going to answer.
My question is actually really similar to the one that Joseph just asked. It's for Deborah Seraf. Considering that the Plan Migrant has already been voted or is in phase of being voted, I was wondering how much of the report that was asked by Aurélien Taché was going to influence it, and if there was anything done at parliamentary level over at least French classes or a beginning of integration for asylum seekers before they obtain the status. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, Deborah, can you answer the questions about France?
Sure.
Over to you, and then we will talk about
Easy.
government contracts. How do you get a government contract, Prime Minister? Maybe you've had
Some other issues, yeah.
You've had some experience. Then there's how does policy change happen? Gentleman over there asked the big question, and then maybe you can also come in on those points. But let's try to cover the French-specific questions in limited time because you're in the middle of this work, so you know what's going on. The first question on France. So there was a question of what do you do in the time of the asylum seekers, listening to refugee voices as you make policy, and then there's some questions about language training. I'm forgetting one, but it'll come.
So let's start about asylum seekers. The whole parliamentary mission that Aurélien is conducting right now is only focusing on people who were actually granted the status or already have a permit, residency permit. So we're not really looking at what's going on with asylum seekers. That's the mission. But obviously, we need to look at it, and indeed, there are many problems with it in France. The time it takes for an asylum seeker to get his asylum granted is very long. It's mostly a year and a half on average. And in compare with Germany, Germany implemented a new policy that allows Syrian refugees, for example, who are the first nationality that comes to Germany, to see their asylum granted in only 2 days. And that's a major change. And President Macron announced during the campaign that this delay was going to be reduced to 6 months, which is huge. It is still very long, but I don't know what to say. It's very hard. I cannot really talk as a government representative. I'm not representing the government, so it's hard to say anything about it. But there's going to be a bill that's going to be passed in early 2018 on asylum seeking, la réforme de l'asile. And this reform that is going to be conducting in the coming month is supposed to reduce these delays. And right now, France doesn't really do anything about asylum seekers in terms of integration during the process of asylum seeking. My personal opinion is that we should do something, as Germany does. Basically, in Germany, the integration process starts as soon as the asylum seekers steps afoot in Germany. So they start learning German as soon as they seek for asylum, which is a big change. It's a huge taboo in France, because what people say in France is that, why should we integrate someone who's not going to stay anyway? So we don't even know whether we're going to grant them the status or not. So let's just not do anything.
Right.
That's hard.
Yeah. Prime Minister.
From my experience, when I was in Sweden many years ago, actually, I started Swedish language before I got granted asylum. And I think that's very important. And that period, the longer it is, the longer you look for work on the black market, you're linked up with mafia, you don't have rights, and then you get the bad name that, all these refugee seekers are. So that period has to be short. But going to that, using that as an example, what the tech world, I think, can do is we have huge, long processes. In Greece, I'm really unhappy that, we still have people that are there 18 months or 2 years in camps waiting for their asylum procedure to be, that's something just unacceptable. The tech community can come in and improve governance through, whether it's blockchain or it's just simple platforms or the whole procedure, even from getting the aid. I mean, one thing we did on the island, of course, I also work with Mercy Corps, where they started giving money directly to the refugees rather than through middlemen. And what that did is, of course, first of all, a sense of dignity. Secondly, they chose what they needed. And thirdly, it linked them with the local community because it wasn't imported to the island food from somewhere else. It was actually they were buying from the island, so that they had this interchange, and it really changed everything. So that type of thing, but the whole process from the first day to the integration and language and citizenship and so on can be electronic governance. If you do that, but why I say there's also we should see refugee as a change agent. In fact, you people are bringing in new ideas, not only for the refugees. These are new ideas for citizens in general. So if we can get governments to see the refugee issue as a niche or as a leverage for changing governance in general, then you maybe get politicians to perk up their ears and say, hey, might be very interesting for our average or normal citizens who haven't come from outside but need these new ways of looking at governance. And but I would also say that for, government is slow, it's difficult. Just sort of to challenge you, a lot of the tech community, I talk a lot to the tech community because I worked a lot as Prime Minister with the tech community, but also around the world now, and I believe in tech. But a lot of the people in the tech community are also saying, politics, government, What I would say, don't be a refugee from politics. Don't be a refugee from politics. Get into politics, go in there, and change the world.
Yeah, and if I can add, I mean, everywhere is different, but studies have been done in Canada and in a couple of other countries which show, going right back to almost the first thing that was said, which show that within 7 years of arrival, the per capita entrepreneurship of refugees and immigrants is higher than people born in the country. Why is that? Because they're, excuse the cliche, they're driven. Yeah. They're conscious. Yeah. They've made enormous choices. They are made to not simply have jobs, but to actually be entrepreneurs if they can figure out a whole. Secondly, we find, one of our biggest problems is that, people who look like me say, well, surely these people want to go to Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver where they'll be with their own. In other words, it's easier for the managers of the government to handle it, right? Whereas the reality is a lot of, for example, the Syrians, we're taking about 60-something thousand Syrian refugees. It's not enough, but anyway. They're going to a lot of small communities. They come from small communities, most of them. And they go into these small communities where, the kind of people who've been there for generations are leaving because they can't figure out how to make money there, what to do. They can only see it like this. And in comes the Syrian refugee. They look around and they say, I can see 10 opportunities here. Because they're much more, snap. They're much more edgy. And we're finding small towns get turned around very fast by immigrants and refugees, which is why you want to get them involved as fast as possible. I don't know what our timing is for refugees. The idea is to get them their refugee status as fast as possible, then they go through the other processes. Right. But the Syrian refugees all become landed immigrants the day they arrive in the country. That was a decision, political decision, so we could move it really fast, Can I just add one thing, and then there's another program which I really like, which we do but not nearly enough, and it's called private sponsorship. It should be called citizen sponsorship. And basically what it does is, and technology plays a big role, what it does is it gets families, groups of families, religious organizations, any kind of organization, sponsor refugees and immigrants. Part of it is the money they agreed to put up to rent their apartments for them and things. But a big part of it is they agree to become their best friends, godparents, to help them find their way into society. And all the numbers show that sponsored refugees and immigrants move ahead twice as fast as government sponsored.
We did some polling on this, and even people in France are in favor of private sponsorship.
It's a great idea.
We're going to do very, very quick, and then we're going to end.
I'm just going to answer very quickly 2 little questions. You asked about talking to refugees and having examples, and I'm very open to it, so just give me your email. And we actually talk with Job Grant, and one of the founders of Job Grant is a refugee, and it was a very great insight to have, first of all. The second question about, you said most French people do not realize refugees are here to stay. It's just a poll. Obviously, a 10 years residency permit that allows you to apply for citizenship obviously means you're here to stay. And in compare with Germany, where some refugees only have a 3 years residency permit, and their asylum status is examined 3 years later to see whether their asylum is still deserved, whether the country is still unsafe or not. We don't have the same system in France. So obviously refugees are here to stay. And something we have to deal with in our report is finding ways to convince the French society that refugees are a chance. And it's a very great task, but I don't have the answer for that.
We'll all fight for it.
We all fight for it. I think we're going to end there unless anybody has anything to say. We apologize for those of you whose questions we did not answer. I'm sure we will have an opportunity to have a drink. Thank you very much. We have failed miserably in our task at saying that politicians can be short, but hopefully our speakers did a wonderful job. Thank you very much.